let's talk about something that has become kind of a taboo type of thing. I want to talk about cancel culture, what it is, how it has become, and how we can hopefully overcome such a thing that is becoming a very dangerous force in our world, in our society. Let's begin. What is it? What cancel culture basically is a one of the negative consequences of the internet. And and what that and why I say this and why it's a concept negative consequence of the internet is because the internet allows you to find people who think like you and avoid people who don't think like you. The internet gives you a lot of information which may not be true, and your sense of judgment could be lost quickly, getting to a point where you don't know what is true or what is not true anymore. It also, where it comes from is from a generate where it has come in when what it is pretty much right now currently is a generational and viewpoint clash. And this is something that we've seen in the past, and something that we need to understand when we have clashes between generations, whether it is millennials and boomers, or millennials and Gen Z, or Gen Z and Gen X, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Or whether the viewpoint, whether you are conservative or liberal, or doesn't matter. Whatever you are, you have to understand that no one is right and no one is wrong. Each one is partially right and each one is partially wrong. And that's something that we need to understand, because no one has the ultimate truth. Yet everyone thinks they do. When you have an argument, you also have, when you say the argument, you have the disadvantage. How you say your argument, you also have a way to deconstruct it, and disadvantage when you say your argument. So the other thing is that this is something that talks about and reflects one of the many incorrectly misaligned incentives that are hurting us, our world, our society, and all of us pretty much. And let's begin. So in the case of journalism, we see that journalists and media companies are struggling because of the internet, because of how the internet has caused a lot of things to go free, right? But now we see journalists and editors and media companies trying to play this clickbait type of thing, so they can make money with ads, and which is partially true. However, I do think there's one more layer that goes there's one more layers, is that mostly new journalists believe that they have some type of right to say what they want to say, just because they are entitled to this free speech narrative, which it's a complicated issue. And this talks about our current state of democracy as well, what a democracy is and what our democracy is not. For instance, I do believe that everyone should have the right to say and speak freely. However, I don't believe that just anyone, just because they want to, they could harm or cause damage to other people, especially when they have bad intentions. Whether it is an intention of money, whether it's an intention of whatever the bad intention is. And again, this gets complicated, because when you say free speech, that says that everyone should have the right to speak freely. However, it doesn't say that anyone could just say anything they want to harm or to cause damage to other people. Complicated issue, but something that we need to think about. So let's go back to the cancel culture topic. So one of the ideas that I think a lot about is the idea of the next inequality. Now we talk about the the wealth inequality and this and that, which is true, whatever. But something that we need to think about more, and a lot of people are just simply not thinking about it, is the inequality of intellect. And that's the one that is going to widen the inequality, wealth, in whatever type of inequality that you talk about. It's that inequality of intellect. Whatever you think of intellect, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But one of the things that is also kind of a consequence, the negative consequence of the internet, is that the internet allows you to become what you want. What you consume, you become. What you become is a result of your actions, experiences, surroundings, everything else. So, when you have something like the internet, a kid, anyone from anywhere in the world, as long as you have a connection to the internet, you can become a physicist, you can become a mathematician, you could become an entrepreneur, you can become what you want. If you want to learn about quantum computing, something super complex, or quantum mechanics, or drawing, whatever it is, you can go, as long as you have an access to the internet, you can go do that and become a world's expert at that thing for free, if you have the energy and motivation and willingness to do it. You can do that. However, because of the negative, the incorrectly misaligned incentive, we have the entertainment industry, which becomes super addictive. We have something like movies, we have something like social media, we become super addictive and gets people from the actual goal, what they want to do. So one of the things that I also talk about, which is related to the inequality of intellect, is that the internet in the future will create the smartest people, which could be called the ultra learners, and the kind of the dumbest people, which could become the ultra deprived people. And that is worrying, because that is where we're going to see kind of like dystopian type of realities, where we have something like the Brave New World type of reality, which we have the smartest guy who has the books and everything, and he reads and is very intellectual, because he devotes his energy to do so. And we have people who are just on the other end, which we just have people who are just living mindlessly and taking drugs and being kind of drugs with like dopamine, and that's basically what social media does. Just basically drugs you to have the dopamine and keep coming back to you. And again, with that rising polarization of intellects, again, whatever you think intellect is, when you have that gap of intellect between two parties, between two people, it's difficult to understand each other, even though we are supposedly more connected, right? And when we have rising polarization, it's difficult to understand each other. And when we have most people on one side and the other, because one side that takes effort, takes energy, which is being constantly getting educated, right? And learning and using the internet for the good, right? Which is hard, which it's not going to be the majority. But when you have people on the other side, which is the easy, which is kind of the addictive type of thing, that is when we have the dangerous one, which is, we have something super dangerous, which is the spread of virus ideas. We're talking about like biological viruses, which are, we have one right now, we had one in the past, we've had many ones in the past, and they're bad. But one that is worse is the virus of ideas. And virus ideas are basically ideas that are spread on people who are usually young, they lack experience and honestly kind of lack of wisdom, and they're usually very type of ideological, and because again, because they're young, they have the kind of lack of experience, and they get kind of brainwashed. Like, that's kind of what it is. And again, I'm not saying I'm the smartest. I'm not diminishing anyone. I'm just sharing my thoughts on this, and hopefully people can get a new perspective. So going back, so cancel culture isn't something new. It's something that took more force. It's now more visible over the last few years, or as these very few people are actually very, very loud. It's kind of mob, quote unquote mob, are very loud, and they aren't the majority. They're just very few people. Just a lot of people are just mindlessly following them, right? So one solution that would be for people who are more rational, people who care about the common good, start talking and start having conversations, so we can bring the people who are mindlessly following the so-called mob to the other side, to the people who are rational, to the people who care about actually making change happen and having a world as a whole, a better world as a whole. And again, this is something that we've seen over and over and over again, and we're gonna see it again in the future. Is that, and this is something that especially happens during the moments of crisis. So, the tension between life and institutions appear in periods of crisis in a society. When that happens, two ways of thinking arise. Number one, conservative forces. Number two, innovative forces. Number one, conservative forces consider the importance of the past to re-establish order. They know they don't want to make the same mistakes that people did. They understand that the past has some value, whether it was right or wrong. The past has some value, therefore we should think about it and value it and consider it as we think about the future. Then we have number two, which is innovative forces. Innovative forces, aware of the need to reinvent new structures, forget what has been achieved and acquired, and also forget the experience of the past. Again, these are very extreme type of thing, and this is what we're seeing now. We are seeing the conservative who and again, I'm not like, this has nothing to do with political, just two point of view that usually happens. Conservative, innovative. So innovators, they just want to make a better future, and just because they want to make a better future, just because of it, they just forget the past because they think the past sucks, and the past isn't going to happen again in the future. And that is exactly the problem. That is exactly where we see people who are condemned to repeat the past because they fail to understand the past, to understand the future, to understand the present, to make a better future. That is exactly the problem. When we have these two forces, you shouldn't try to identify with one. Just go for it and just kind of be happy-go-lucky, because I think both forces, both viewpoints have value, and each one of them, each one has its value and its importance. And what we should do is use both values and have them in our minds and use them when the right circumstance appear. Each one is good for different circumstances. Don't try to, and you can have both. When you should decide between A and B, choose A, B, and C. And to conclude, the bottom line, the conclusion is that we should only have one thing in mind, and that is what actually causes progress and what actually causes us to incentivize and have more common good, and to have a better and to have a better world as a whole. What should we have in mind is what actually causes progress. Thank you so much.